E-commerce students, today we're going to start talking about the idea of business models. It was really important at the beginning of e-commerce, the beginning of the modern e-commerce era, that we had great ideas. The problem was many of those great ideas did not have great business models, and that's what we're going to be talking about in this chapter, how we make business sense. So, what are our objectives? We want to get into what the main elements are of being able to be profitable, to make money. We're going to talk about what those models are, from a business to consumer and a business to business concept. And we're also going to talk about how we apply these strategies specifically to e-commerce. A lot of these models we're going to be talking about are not unique to e-commerce. They're just sound business practices. So an e-commerce business model simply means how you're making money. What is your plan to make money? How do you start off with raw materials and turn them into profit at the end? The business model is described in a document called a business plan. And of course, if we're talking about e-commerce, if we are not leveraging the unique parts of e-commerce, the connectivity, the ubiquity, etc., it's not really an e-commerce business model. So these are the 8 elements of a business model. We're going to be talking through each of these so you can apply them to an e-commerce business. Your value proposition simply means, why should somebody buy from you? What have you done to make yourself credible? How do you bring value to the market? What is your value proposition? The second is specifically how you're making money. For example, do you have a typical business model, a typical revenue model where you sell things at a profit, which would be a sales revenue model? Do you charge a transaction fee like eBay does, for example? Or do you have a freemium strategy if you're selling content? For example, if you're Spotify, you can get a free subscription, or you can pay a little more to get what you really want. The revenue model is simply how you're making money. Your market opportunity means, is there a place for you in the market? There are all kinds of markets. There's stores for everything and everyone like Amazon. There's specialty stores like Blue Flame motorcycle exhaust and all kinds of stores in between. What you really have to think about is there room for you in the market. We're going to be talking about that in context of competition as well. Who else is in your market space? Are you getting into a crowded field, or is this a non-crowded field? Do you have a specific enough niche? Are you competing on something such as price, or is there something that is more specific, something that is more unique to your product? Again, I don't know that I'd want to get into the everything business and try to go up against Amazon, but if I have a unique product or service that people want or need, why not sell it myself? What is your advantage competitively? What do you do better? Maybe you are the only person in your particular niche. Maybe you are better from a price standpoint. Maybe you've even gotten to a point because you have such a unique place in the market, you've got what we refer to as an unfair advantage or leverage. The bottom line is it's usually some level of asymmetry. Generally speaking, somebody has an advantage in the market. So is it you or not? What's your strategy? How are you getting the word out about your products? How are you getting people to know about it? Are you relying on social media, or are you doing something else? How are you promoting your product? Are you using email? This could also be based on your demographic. For example, a Gen Xer, somebody over the age of 40, still checks their email a lot. That might be a very effective methodology of marketing. Somebody under the age of 20, probably not. And you need to think about how you're going to reach those folks. Then you've also got to think about, what does it take to make your business plan actually work? How does your company need to be set up? One of the reasons drop shipping is so popular is because, and we'll get to what drop shipping is in this chapter, it really eliminates the need to manufacture. So what do you need to have happen to be able to produce products or services? And finally, who do you need running your company? What kinds of backgrounds do you need? If I were starting an athletic apparel company, for example, I would hope that some of the people who are working for my company had a background in athletics. If I were working on something involving medical sales, if I were doing business-to-business kinds of planning, I would hope that the people working for my company had the right kind of experience to be able to sell. For example, too, do you have somebody to protect your intellectual property? Do you have a patent attorney? Do you have somebody who is taking on things like liability? Those are parts of your management team you may need to consider. So then we get into some of the new emerging business models. I think this is important to consider. I use drop shipping as an example of a pretty cool e-commerce business model. It's really a neat idea, and it's something that leverages the power of e-commerce. However, you better make sure that you've got the right people working for you. The way drop shipping works, and we'll talk about this in the video this week as well, essentially drop shipping works as follows. You develop a relationship with somebody probably outside of your home country. Usually a lot of these are based out of places like China. And what you essentially do is take orders through something like a Shopify page. You do a markup on the order, and you have something shipped directly from a manufacturer or a supplier, oftentimes in China, to somebody else. That all sounds great, so long as you've done the homework and the organizational development and build a management team who you can rely on to get these things where they need to be. And so that's an example of our business approaches have to be aligned with the reality of the service line that we're in. So again, we start talking about the 8 key elements. Let's review those. The value proposition. Why should somebody buy from you? The revenue model. How do you make money? The market opportunity. Is there an opening for you to even get in? Is there a need for what you have to sell? The competitive environment. How many people are you up against? The competitive advantage. What do you do better than everybody else? The market strategy. How are you going to let people know about your product or service? The organizational development. What needs to happen in a company to deliver the product or service you want to deliver? And finally, your management team. Who do you need calling the shots? Well, you have a great idea, so how are you going to fund it? So we start talking about things like seed capital. How are you getting the money to start your company? If you're Jeff Bezos and you happen to be rich, you can get a loan from somebody in your family. Otherwise, you might need to get a bank loan or to do other kinds of fundraising. You're going to need to be able to pitch your company very quickly with an elevator pitch. Some places where people typically get money. You have business incubators who offer either zero interest or low interest loans. You may have angel investors who, again, love your idea or concept and have disposable income to give to you for maybe low or no interest. Then you get into commercial banks, and those are going to charge you interest. And these days, with interest rates rising, that's a less attractive form of fundraising than ever. Venture capitals, firms will definitely be interested in good ideas, but they're going to want part of them as well. And then you start looking at strategic partners. Are there other people who you can go in on this business with who can take over part of the venture, for example? And I love talking about crowdfunding. We get into the idea that more people can be equity investors in small and new ideas. If you think about things, for example, like GoFundMe, like Kickstarter, the old stereotype is you're just giving people money because they're asking for it. In reality, you're investing in an idea. The example I always use, there's a guy named Todd McFarlane. He was a comic book artist in the 90s and had a very successful character. People my age, people in their 40s, knew the character very well. He was called Spawn. He came back in the early, actually it was 2020, and said, I'd like to make a collectible from this character from the 90s. And he got people to buy it in advance, to pre-order it through a crowdfunding campaign. He had so many people who wanted in on this, several $1 million he raised to make an action figure. That ended up being the seed capital, restart his toy company. And so essentially anybody who invested in some little way was an equity investor. The Jobs Act simply means, and I'll post the video of this as well, the Jobs Act simply means that you can get into equity investing at smaller levels without having to have a company do an IPO of stock or to have a big prospectus. It gives an opportunity for people with less amounts of money to get involved with equity investing. So it is democratizing the idea of equity investing. The Jobs Act has lowered the threshold for minimum investments in things like equity investing. The video will help you give some context to that as well. So what about crowdfunding? Why is it taking off? Why isn't it? I think one of the biggest stereotypes that we have in terms of crowdfunding, as I mentioned, is it's simply people asking for money for nothing. Successful crowdfunding is not going to build your network for you. You're going to have a powerful network, and if you're lucky, you have a product or service that people want. For example, there was a TV series in the late 90s called Veronica Mars, and so many people wanted a movie of that made that they were willing to give up a few bucks in a crowdfunding campaign to have the startup funds for the movie to get made. You can go over and over again and look at different films or creative endeavors who've been made whole through the idea of fans investing. And again, crowdfunding is a really legit business model now, simply because people are telling companies what they want them to make, and they're putting their money in the game. It's a great way for companies to put less of their own skin in the game. So when we think about these things, the questions you should be asking yourself, and this is applied to this week's assignment. Again, ask yourself, why you? Detail how your company would make money. Think about what your market opportunity might be. In other words, is there room for you? Think about how many people you might be up against. Think about what you could do better than all of them, or at least a number of them. Are you competing based on quality, cost, or niche? How are you getting the word out about your product or service? How is your company need to be set up, your organizational development, and who needs to be a part of it? So in terms of the way we categorize these business models, again, just like our previous discussions about e-commerce designations, you can be more than one. And so it can be based on sector, it can be based on model, it can be based on the technology used. And we'll talk about how all of these are set up, because again, your company can be one or multiple types of e-commerce, and you can use more than one business model. So let's talk about these business models. We're going to start off with e-tailers and working all our way to service providers. E-tailer is the most traditional kind of e-commerce there is. It simply means you're doing what a traditional brick and mortar retailer does, except you're doing it online. And it means that you are selling products or services for a markup. You're putting a profit on top of what you're selling. So in terms of the variations that we see, a virtual merchant is somebody essentially who just sets up a virtual shop. So if I decided I'm going to sell, because if you've ever been to my office, it's full of Batman figures. I'm going to sell Batman figures online. I'm a virtual merchant. Bricks and clicks means that I've got an in-person presence and I sell online. Think about Target or Walmart. A catalog merchant. Some of these folks were really well suited to adapt to e-commerce. If you think about the big catalog sales, I'm thinking about Land's End, I'm thinking about Cabela's. These were essentially mail order catalogs. So to transition from a paper catalog to an online catalog was pretty straightforward. And then manufacturer direct simply means a lot of companies, I'm looking at you, Nike, are saying, why should we sell through retailers? We can sell directly to our consumers. We say there's low barriers to entry. There's nothing to stop someone from setting up an e-commerce store. Doesn't mean it'll be cheap or easy, but there are low barriers in terms of anybody can do it. Then we get into what we refer to as community providers. Generically, these days we're calling them social networks. We go on there to hang out, to exchange information, and it's a great place to sell people products. How do you get revenue from these? If you're Facebook, if you're Instagram, if you are TikTok, you're making your money primarily either through advertising or selling customer data to third parties. That's just how it works. And some of these social networks do offer subscriptions. For example, LinkedIn offers a professional subscription model that comes with certain features, but most people are not paying for social networks. Then we get into one of the newest and most successful models, which is content provider. These are capable in 2023 and beyond because the networks have gotten so much better. When Netflix started, it was not streaming video. Netflix would send you DVDs in the mail. And the reason that was the model is because the network simply would not support it. The actual internet connections wouldn't support it. And so it's just buying digital content on the web. One of the earliest models we saw in terms of a pay content model was iTunes, when Steve Jobs basically saved the music industry by allowing people to buy songs online. So there's a lot of different revenue models here. Direct sales, which is less of the model all the time because people are generally not buying as much digital content, with the exception of maybe the occasional movie on Amazon or YouTube. Advertising, for example, if we watch YouTube for free, we're getting it supported by advertising. And then we also can get subscription or freemium models as well, meaning I pay a monthly fee to Netflix to be able to get my subscription. And again, this comes down to content being king. The movies we want to see determine what streaming networks we subscribe to. And again, there's a lot of variations to this. When we say syndication or aggregators, syndication simply means, for example, we're licensing content for somebody else to distribute. If you watch Tubi, for example, on your smart TV, that programming has been syndicated. It's been lent to those content providers. Or aggregators. For example, if you get on Amazon Prime, you can buy subscriptions to multiple streaming services. So what are some of the implications we're getting into here? I put up a picture of Spotify and Joe Rogan. The reason it's important for our consideration, back in I believe it was 2022, Joe Rogan was saying some things on his podcast that some people found controversial. They did not like some of his opinions about things like vaccine mandates, for example. And Neil Young, who was a classic rock artist, had a real problem with Joe Rogan, and he said, if you don't pull Joe Rogan, I want my music taken off your platform. And Spotify looked at the numbers, and Joe Rogan's plays and ratings were more powerful than Neil Young's, and he was making more money for the platform. And so Rogan stayed, and Neil Young was out. So what this means is in terms of accessibility of content, for companies may come down to actual individual artists or producers having opinions about the networks it's on, which will probably shape the subscriber base. Just to give you some context in terms of if you want to know who the biggest songs were for 2022, these are numbers that came out at the end of the year. You can see, for example, The Weeknd's doing okay with making about almost 14 million in plays for a single song. The top artists for 2022 again. Some of these have been around for a while, but we have some new names showing up there as well. So these are people who are making a lot of money off these content models. In terms of another model we have, it's called a portal. And it means basically that there's some place we always go back to find things. Think about, for example, when you fire up your laptop at home, many people go straight to Google. Why? Because you're getting your news there, you're getting your email there, you're getting the things you check in with every day. And so portals are great places for people to advertise as well. Generally speaking, we get portals for free, quote unquote, in exchange for giving up information for targeted advertising. So there's all kinds of portals here as well. We get into transaction brokers. Again, there are companies that make money by charging people a fee for connecting a person with a product or service. It's an ideal model, particularly if we're talking about travel or financial services, in which the products are not tangible things. Why not connect people? I think, for example, Airbnb or VRBO are great models for this, that we're connecting people who want cool places to stay with people who have available rentals, and the intermediary charges a transaction fee. There are people then who flat out create markets. For example, before eBay, nobody had thought about online auctions. Uber created an entire new market for ride sharing simply because the taxi system was so bad in the United States. So you also notice, by the way, Uber and Airbnb also are transaction broker models as well as being market creators. You can have more than one business model designation. And then we have service providers. Again, a lot of these service providers are giving us things for free. For Google's in a lot of these business models. Why does Google give you all this stuff for free? Because they want your information. As the documentary, The Social Dilemma stated, if you're getting something for free on the internet, you probably are the product. And again, it comes down to selling your information for targeted advertising. It's all about attention and eyes. What we're getting into next is business-to-business business models. Say that real fast. Business-to-business business models. What we call B2B2B. So in terms of the way these work, these are essentially online versions of existing ways of doing business. We are going to talk a little bit about private industrial networks, which is a form of e-business as well as e-commerce. So e-distributors simply means if you've got a distributor of parts or supplies that you've taken your sales online, it makes perfect sense. For example, Grainger is a company that literally has millions of pieces of equipment and supplies. They sell everybody from the welding to plumbing industries. Why not put that online? Because it's all catalog and number based anyway. So e-distributors simply take the model online. We get into e-procurement, we're talking about buying business services. For example, you might not maintain your own accounting or HR departments. Why not subcontract with an e-procurement agency to be able to do that for you? Software as a service, for example. Then we get into exchanges. If you're buying massive amounts of products, let's say, for example, you print magazines. If you still print magazines in 2023 and you need paper, or if you make cans and you need aluminum or steel, then you can go to exchanges and see the competition between suppliers to sell to you. There are fewer exchanges than there used to be because a lot of the companies simply could not take the drastic price competition, and so they got out and built relationship sales instead of competing against other companies in these mega exchanges. We get to industry consortia. We're talking about online places for very specialized and very big businesses to buy parts and supplies. For example, if you are Boeing, you're going to have to go with very specific suppliers to get the kinds of industrial goods you need to build airplanes. So a traditional exchange is not going to work well for you. You're going to need to be in an industry consortia. That's a big B2B model. And then we get into private industrial networks. Here's the idea, that we're connecting suppliers and customers to very large, powerful networks to be able to process massive amounts of orders. One of the best examples I can think of is Walmart. If you're a supplier and you want to sell to Walmart, you've got to use their private industrial network to communicate with them. You will adopt their sales model. It gets very fuzzy at times. Who's working for whom? And Walmart's got leverage here, by the way. These are our 2021 numbers, but they actually charge fines to the suppliers who are late on deliveries. They take it seriously with their customers, and they want suppliers who are going to be able to live up to their expectations. So how does e-commerce change business? It basically means that we're creating more rivalry because people need to be more efficient. If you're not getting online, it can be challenging. And getting online, converting traditional businesses to online models can take money. All of a sudden, when e-business comes online, a company that might have relied on a local supplier now has global options, and they can shop with whoever is the best person. All of a sudden, buyers have options, and you can go back and exude your leverage over the people you buy from as a customer. Industry value chains simply mean, how do we create value? How do we convert something from raw materials into products that we can sell? If we're using e-commerce and e-business, we can make these processes more efficient. For example, a value chain simply means that we have suppliers who give us goods, who get them to manufacturers who make things. Once the manufacturers make things, they go to distributors who sell them to retailers who sell them to customers. And then we've also got logistics as a part of this, because transport is a part of every part of the chain. If you're Amazon, you're cutting out all of these things, and you're going directly from your own supply chain to the customer, because you're even controlling your own distribution and transportation networks at this point in time. When we get into what constitutes a value chain, it means that from the time you have a raw material to the time you get it to a person, you've got to go through these steps. Again, supplier to manufacturer to distributor to retailer to transporter to customers. And thanks to e-commerce, why not just go from the manufacturer once you've built it? Suppliers are still doing okay, but manufacturers can go directly to the customers. What do you get out of this? You get one happy capitalist, that's for sure. So the more we streamline things, the more we can reduce costs, the more competitive we can be for our customers. And that's exactly what's happening. This is also driving things like companies needing to have their own access to very specialized data. In fact, we're even seeing it now in terms of companies who do outdoor types of services, construction, or other kinds of supplies, even getting their own customized weather forecasts so they can be better prepared than the other companies. When we get into these, we produce what we call firm value chains, and that means how we ultimately create value. The bottom line on this is that internet access and internet alignment and doing all this digital is helping us better align our business practices, whether it means that we are hiring different people, whether we are hiring and firing at specific times, whether we're aligning our companies better. If we get into really measuring how our products are made, how they leave our companies, how they are shipped, and how people get what we promise them. If we can align those primary activities of why the company exists with our secondary activities of the people who run them. Let me make that clear. If I'm Ford Motor Company, I exist to make vehicles that I sell to companies and individuals. To make that happen, I need to have people in the administration who make decisions. I need people in HR to hire people and develop people. I need the information systems to be able to keep track of all this stuff. I need procurement to buy supplies, and I need somebody keeping track of the money as well. If we make this all digital, we can align the decisions on both sides of that line. So the better we align our business processes, the more efficient we can be, the better use we can make of our resources. And finally, we get into, if we've done all this right, we've got what we refer to as a firm value web, and it simply means every part of our enterprise is wired to use the same systems to make sure we're operating at peak efficiency and making best use of our supplies to make products and services that our customers get when they need them and how they want them. So an internet-enabled value web simply means that everybody sooner or later is tied together, depending what industry you're in. Whoever you're buying your supplies from, whoever you're selling to, ultimately are connected. And again, when you get into strategic alliance and partner firms, it means you may have other folks. If you're Walmart, for example, and you've got tight relationships with your suppliers, they're probably going to be part of your value web as well. So, in terms of our business strategy, ultimately the goal, if you're a for-profit company, is to make product and to make profit, I should say. The strategies for doing this, again, these are how business to business works. How is your product different than everybody else's? What cost do you want to be at? Are you competing on low cost, or are you in a premium market? What range of products do you want to make? For example, some companies have spread themselves too thin and tried to be too many things to too many people. Is there a particular market that you direct your efforts toward, and how well do you know your customer? In the era of e-commerce and e-business, do not underestimate the value of relationships. Ultimately, all the technology in the world is great, but when supplier one goes down, you hope that you've got a relationship with supplier two, especially in our uncertain world right now with very easily disrupted supply chains. So again, these have been disruptive types of approaches. If we look at a company like Uber, for example, it disrupted the existing order. If we look at, for example, the idea of industry consortia, if I'm Ford Motor Company, I've got a global supply chain of people I can buy parts or raw materials off of. This gives us options. It gives us redundancy. And so, again, there are many types of disruptors in this field. We saw disruptors in the 1970s when we had cheap steel, for example, flooding into the United States. Some disruption can be bad. Disruption can be good too. If somebody produces a better product than you, that means you got to keep up. So sometimes the new product is better. Are you going to come back, or are you going to let somebody else take your market? And folks, that is our basic introduction to the business models behind e-commerce. I hope you have a wonderful day.